All right. There we go. We are off and running with the great and powerful Ian Titus. You have an amazing name, by the way. Like, you have a name that makes me think of a Greek god, just like Ian Titus. It's the Titus, that last one.
I'll take that. In high school, it was, just with the itis on the end, I was any disease you could think of, but it usually had something to do with somebody's nuts. So.
Oh, yeah. That's the one where you go home and you're just like, geez, mom and dad, why did you do this to me? This is all your fault.
I hate this name.
I hate this name. I'm going to change it. Oh,
but it was unique. There was only like one other Ian, I think. So it worked out.
That is good. That is good, dude. I'm going to brag on you here for a second because you've been absolutely crushing for what feels like the last year with us here at Rebel Performance. First in that Apex athlete situation and now in our training team.
Yep.
You've just been on absolute fire. So I'm going to brag on you and just give you kind of like huge public high fives for showing up, doing the work. Do you have any numbers off the top of your head that we can reference just so people have an idea when I say like you've been on fire? Like, what does that actually mean in terms of like where you were about a year ago versus where your numbers are now? We can think about like squat, bench, dead, conditioning tests, vertical, broad jump, stuff like that. Do you have any numbers top of mind that you think kind of like reflect that well?
The deadlift is my favorite. So it's like, there's two sides. It's my favorite, but it's also most likely to just crush you. And that's how I spent the last few years. When I turned 40, so I'm 43, turned 40 and I was like, I'm going to hit 500 by 50. So that was kind of, I'm sitting there, I worked at Lifetime and I'm in the break room and I'm talking to one of the guys and, he's kind of fresh out of school and he's like, that research says that that's impossible. I'm like, fuck research. I'm going to do it. But then as I kept trying to do it, I realized like, man, this is rough. So I hurt myself in 2018, right at the beginning of the year. Ego, I was at a smaller gym, had one guy in there other than the owner that pulled more than me. And I was at like 435, I think was my max at that point. He pulled 450 and just on a random like Friday after class, I was like, yeah, I'll see what I got. Pulled it up, burning around the hips. So that was it. Kicking myself like, you idiot. So it took a while to get back up to even deadlifting. I think I took, I kept trying, but it just didn't feel right. So I tried 6 months, started deadlifting again. 225 I was doing them super slow. Basically did that for a while. I got up, I pulled like over 400 once in the last probably up until about the middle of last year. And then switched over to trap bar because I was just done with straight bar. I didn't want to feel like a train wreck. Jumped on with you guys last year, at least the Rebel mentorship with Kyle and Matt. And so ran AMRAP, and I just fell in love with AMRAP. So I'm glad to see all the AMRAP sets that were in there this year. Because I definitely shine with that. But so it was 430. 430 was kind of like, I didn't ever go above that. I hit 430 for like 5 last year. December, hurt myself again, being an idiot. Let's see, I took like 370 for like 14. On the 7th one, I felt something and I was like, I'll just keep going. Trying to channel my inner Ronnie Coleman and spent December I'd get up and I would just be like, just grunting and couldn't stand up straight. Felt like an old man again. And I was like, I'm done programming for myself. So that's when I jumped on the Apex team. Now, when we started, I felt a lot better. So that was good. And I hit that 430 for 3 for the first round I was like, that was hard. But it felt good. So I didn't hurt myself. Went through that first round, pulled 500, surprised myself because I hit 450 and I was like, all right, I'll try it. And then at the end of this round, I hit 500 for 6, and that's when I was like, holy shit. So, because I had the 600 by 60 goal. So I'm like, okay, I can do 500 by 50. I got 10 years to do that. I got 600 by 60. I got 20 years. I can probably add another 170 pounds to my deadlift. And so, yeah, I pulled that 560. I went to the owner of the gym that I'm at now. He's a power lifter. And I'm like, I did those 1RM calculators, and it said, or I did 500 for 6, and the calculator said I could pull 580, and I was like, I'm not trying that. And I know that wasn't even in the program, but I went over to him, and he's like 600. I'm like, no. And he's like 560. Like, all right. So that was the video that you saw. I was just grip and rip.
Yeah, dude, it was great. It was awesome. It was a good lift too. Like, it was one of those things where you didn't lift it, and I'm sitting here as a coach just like cringing in the background. You're like, oh, sweet mother of God, I can't wait for this lift to be over. It looked really good. Yeah, man. So it's huge. Like, I remember logging into the team forum, seeing the video and the post, and I had like do a double take, and I was like, hold on. I was like, you added 100 pounds to your deadlift, more or less, ballpark.
Yeah.
In a 12 to 14 week training cycle.
Yeah, I was blown away. I mean, I hit the 5. It was a funny thing, when I hit 5, I came back a week later to see if I could rep it, because we were in that testing. So I tested that first week, and then the second week was kind of just do whatever. I couldn't even budge 470. I was just like, okay. So
still torched.
Yeah, I'll hold my 5. But yeah, I came back after this, and I mean, I just felt great the entire time. I know that I mentioned a few hip things, but the way that everything is programmed now, it's just, they kind of fix itself if you just don't get too crazy. Especially, I don't know, I don't feel old, but I do respect that I am 43, 44 in a month, and
all right.
So still trying to just let other old men know that you can still get after it.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's awesome. Like, hearing the story, I love that. You know, I didn't know when you first came on board at Rebel that you had that 500-pound deadlift goal, and I didn't know the problems that had arisen in trying to get there. But I was like so amped when I realized that what the goal was. And then it's like, we got you to do it once. And then one more training cycle later, you did it 6 times. And then just for shits, fun, and giggles, you're like, I'm going to go ahead and pull 560. It's like, it's so much progress in such a relatively short period of time in terms of like how we usually think of these things. And I mean, I think the other thing that really, got me pretty amped about it is that you did it while also feeling really good. Yeah. Right. It wasn't one of those things where it's like, okay, we got you to your lift, but now you're going to walk around and feel like a train wreck for the rest of the week. Right.
Absolutely.
We blew up this lift. Go ahead.
When you're over 40, something hurts all the time, especially when you're lifting. I just laugh at, when you get like a 35-year-old guy walking in the gym, be like, just getting old, and I'm like, no, you're not. You're doing something else wrong. But even speaking of just being in pain, like after I hurt myself in 2018, it was just 3 years of trying to figure it out, 2 years, and just being really pissed off a lot, because it's like you're out here helping people get fit, and that you can't even figure out yourself. And so I was like, this is not supposed to hurt. I should know what to do. But of course, I was actually going through I listened to the one with Chris, and the same thing, like when we program for ourselves, it's like, I'm going to add in, instead of 4 accessories, I think 10 probably is going to be better. So there's a little bit of a slap in the face education also, because it's not like I'm doing that for the people that I train, but it's like, well, I can handle it though, because I'm a badass. And yes. No, they will crush you.
Yeah. So I think it would be interesting if we could look at a little bit of dichotomy here in terms of let's zoom ourselves back to the beginning of this story where you're sitting there, you're like, I'm going to set this goal of wanting to deadlift 500 by the time I'm 50. And then you went in, like most people do right off the bat, wanting to try to manage and do it all yourself. But then ran into the issue of when I do it all myself, I usually end up overthinking it, second guessing it so much, I overprogram it for myself. What were, you think, some of the key differences between that phase where you were trying to do it all yourself, but kept running into problems of like back pain, hip pain? And I've been there before, and it's so frustrating, debilitating, because all you want to do is go train hard, fast, and heavy because it's the thing that you love. But you can't because you just feel like a dumpster fire.
Right.
Can you think of any big, obvious differences and changes between what you were doing when you were doing it yourself versus how things changed when you came on board at Rebel and what we were having you do?
Probably maybe just a little bit of backstory on that. So I was a Strong First instructor. Basically, I listened to Tim Ferriss talk to Pavel in about 2015, and I was like, that's awesome. Like you can get strong and you don't have to do a lot of reps, and I can create tension. So let's do that. So I jumped on the Strong First bandwagon, and I mean, I loved it. It was, I definitely got a lot stronger, felt a lot stronger, leaned up. Well, I've always been lean, but I guess you could say muscled up actually a little bit. But everything is bilateral. And it's like, I had been following Eric Cressy for a while, just being a baseball guy. So I knew all about the single leg stuff. I got the High Performance Handbook, did that, but didn't really buy into it. I actually heard Dana Santis on his podcast a couple of years ago talking about PRI and, getting some exhales. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. So I tried that. There was actually a move from Paul Chek that I got one of his books, and basically it's like a dead bug position, but you're lowering your legs without letting your pelvis come up off your fingers, and no back pain for like 3 minutes. And then after hearing both of those things, it was like, okay, I'm sold on this. So I kind of went down that rabbit hole, started incorporating a lot more single leg, single arm, rotating. Now, because Strong First is all, powerlifting and bilateral. And so the biggest thing, to get back to the point, is, and I think this is just like a theme that you hear all the time, got to do things on one leg. I mean, because it's, I got clients that don't have a squat rack at home, so put them on one leg. Like, you don't get that axial loading, and they can feel it. Most people can't even get up off the ground on one leg the first time you have them try it, and they're pretty shocked. And then you get even powerlifters doing it, and they're like shaking like crazy. So I knew there was something there. And then so just adding in rotation, really getting the adductors involved, and adductors as they're supposed to work, not when your knees are, basically to your sides, because that messed up my hips trying to sumo deadlift. Also made my back feel better, but fucked up my hips. So yeah. So all in all, that it's the unilateral stuff, and especially the alternating unilateral stuff. If you can get the hips kind of shifting, they just kind of find a sweet spot, and you can kind of tell.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that we hear from people, because we tend to get a lot of people on the training team like yourself who are coming from being former athletes. They love training and throwing down. It's such an essential part of their life. It's not going anywhere, right? Like our population of people aren't the ones that are just going to like ride off into the sunset and just like watch their performance slowly decline over time. Everybody in our family is very much like you. It's like, I am going to continue to push myself to get better day after day, week after week, year after year. I don't care that I'm getting older. I'm going to keep living at my physical peak and pushing the boundary of what I'm capable of. But what that causes for some people is that they have a very hard time separating that performance output from actually feeling good and being in pain.
Right.
there's like this, they become too married together to where it's like, yeah, maybe my performance has gone up a little bit, but I'm also really in pain. And they can't figure out a way to separate those two worlds to where it's like, oh, my performance is literally skyrocketing and I feel better than I ever have before. Right. And I think the exercise selection, as you mentioned, is one of the biggest differences that we hear from people who come on board. And I'm glad you brought the bilateral stuff in particular, because yeah, it's like we have places in your training where we have the big bilateral movements and you know that's go time, you know that's a show. But then we're layering on tons of other unilateral, alternating, reciprocal type activity so that we can grease the gears, get you moving really well, get you feeling really good. And I mention this all the time, but it's like it really does create this powerful flywheel effect where my big main lift is driving a performance outcome. My accessories are helping me move better, feel better, etc., contributing into me being able to push harder on my main lift, which then allows me to get even more performance outcome. And it's like, yeah, I'm just waiting for more people to adopt this as a method, because between you and all the other people we keep having on the podcast talking about these pretty ridiculous results in a short period of time, like, it works.
Absolutely. That's what, I mean, even coming into it, it's, I mean, as a coach, we've got to market, and when you're saying that people are seeing these results, it's usually like, I mean, a 30-pound PR doesn't sound like a lot, but, and that it's going to matter your training age, but it's still a pretty decent jump. 130 pounds. I mean, I did not expect it. So that's even better. And I've been harping on the deadlift, but I mean, I squatted 300 for the first time ever. With the safety squat bar, I don't think I'll ever back squat again. I mean, even just putting the bar on my back with no weight is, I don't like it. I just don't like the way it feels. So, I mean, it's not even like the exercise select. It's like the implements that you're using are just, they're better for, again, it's not sport, so we don't have to worry about training for a CrossFit competition or a powerlifting competition or Olympic weightlifting. That's just a whole other thing that you've already addressed on the podcast. But it's just put yourself into a good position because you want to get stronger and you want to feel good. And if you need to do something that's, if you need to help a buddy move furniture, if you need to help somebody lift something heavy, just carrying it from one house to another or anything like that, it's like I think I heard this from Dan John. It's like, you want to be the person that they call, because I mean, they can count on you for being strong. But the implement, and I did yesterday. So I'm working with Ryan now. So I switched over to try to add some mass, which I've had a little hiccup going into that, but I squatted without ramps for the first time in 2 years and no pain from that. So that kind of surprised me too. I was like, my back didn't pop. It usually pops. And then I feel it like 2 hours later. So, it was doing the density sets, going back and forth. It felt good. So I'm still pleased.
That's great, man. Yeah, I'm just so amped for the progress that you've been making. In terms of the implements and the exercise selection, do you have any specific examples top of mind that you felt were really, really helpful in terms of allowing you to be in this position of improving performance without seeing escalations in pain and ending up where you were previously?
I think some of the variations in how you treat like a row, for example, I would notice, or even pull downs, and I was at a bodybuilding gym prior to going to this powerlifting gym. So it's sort of the same. Of course, there are different goals, but the movements look the same. Everybody's, with their lat pull downs, it's super archy and everything's an arch, and they wear a belt thinking that that's going to, no offense to any bodybuilders or powerlifters, but you don't have to wear a belt the entire time you're in the gym. And I think it just adds to the pain that they experience. So it's, back to the one arm row variation. So you've got where you're basically trying to keep your skeleton in a good neutral position. Neutral is relative, but a good position where you can still feel abs and let your scapula come around. And that's been a game changer, because I would get headaches all the time for the back and down. And I never understood why. I do now, but just having that compressive force in the middle of, at your neck constantly is a recipe for disaster. And so I couldn't row a few days. I'm like, I don't want a headache. I can't do pull-ups because I get a headache every time. And so adding in the alternating pull downs, alternating rows, really focusing on just getting proper form and going slower, I think helps out quite a bit too.
Yeah, for sure. I think that adjustment in the row technique in particular, where we're appreciating and feeling, bringing your rib cage back to a shoulder blade, not arching like crazy, not pinning a shoulder blade, but actually teaching that shoulder blade to move on your rib cage, right? And we can take that in a decline, horizontal, incline, or vertical example, right? But like getting people to kind of flip that switch and get out of this mentality that has been overcoached for way too long, which is like in a one-arm dumbbell row as an example, like that idea that you're going to get on a bench and you're going to arch and you're going to pin your shoulder blade and then we're going to row. It's like, well, you're not like that. You're just doing elbow flexion and extension.
Yeah. What do you work?
That's not a row, right? Like we need to reach. And a lot of times when I coach a dumbbell row the first time, I'll tell people, hey, I care more about the offhand right now than I do about the actual row. Because the weight on the row is going to come, but if we can't actually get you to feel a reach with the offhand to bring ribs and a sternum and shoulder back to your shoulder blade, and then hold that position and actually be able to row on top of it. Like I care about the shape first. Once we get the shape, the weight comes really easy and it comes really fast.
Yeah.
But it's those small tweaks and adjustments for people that make such a huge difference, I think, at least from our experience so far.
Yeah. And it's almost like you go from using ego plays a massive role here. People just they just refuse to go down in weight. And I get it, because that's how I was too. And it's
hard.
A lot of my
it's really hard.
It is. But it's not even taking like a lot of steps back to make progress. You're just taking a couple steps back, because I noticed that just 50 pounds is what I would usually use for rows. But after we kind of got into the program and we were doing those really, 3 second on the eccentric, the weight starts going up. Like when you're in a good position, the weight will it's almost like you're getting these newbie gains again, because your body's like, this is fresh, this feels right. And I think that's probably the better thing about programming in this way, and really just paying attention to what you're doing in the gym, and then dropping your ego, because like you don't have to have a barbell all the time. But inevitably somebody's always saying, well, if it's not a barbell deadlift, it's not a real deadlift. And 560 pounds is tough no matter what, so it doesn't really matter.
Especially beltless, which we forgot to mention at the beginning. It was a 560 pound beltless deadlift.
Yeah. I don't
beltless, strapless.
Yeah. I don't use belts. I don't use straps. I've had some friends that are just getting into lifting, asking about straps, and it's like that. Not even close to needing that. It's something that if you're competing and if you're farther along the line, then maybe, but again, I think that goes with ego, because you can always hook grip. But then again, if you're deadlifting and you're deadlifting with a straight bar, let's go hit overhand grip, and you can just kind of self-auto regulate a little bit and not get hurt.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody listening to this was like, man, Ian, this is such an inspiration. It's so awesome to see this, transformation of sorts, of setting this really cool goal, which I'm totally on board with and love. Like I love the 500 pound deadlift goal. That's such an awesome milestone to hit, right? But I think that there are probably going to be a number of people listening to this that have had that goal and similar to you, have struggled to get there without the pain and injuries and other complications that come with it, or without losing everything else that they care about, right?
Yeah.
Being able to move well, feel good, be athletic, etc. If you're going to try to boil this down into some key action steps for people, if somebody wanted to try to replicate what you've done, what would you tell them?
Let someone else help you. Because I mean, it's just even like with coaching and even technique stuff, like you can't see yourself. You can shoot. I've shot more videos this year than ever, and it's still annoying because it's like it just adds like time to to when you're lifting, and you're not going to go back and check every rep. So you need other eyes, and you need somebody else's input on what you're doing, because they can look at it without emotion. So they can just detach themselves and look like, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what's going wrong. Here's how I think you should fix it. And I've done this for other people, and they still will be like, nah, only 3 accessories. I had 20, and I literally had a guy that had about 20 accessories, and I'm like, how long you plan on being here? So yeah, it's kind of like give up, just take your ego out of it. You want to get better, so focus on getting better and let that be the thing that your ego's after, rather than any sort of number. Implement. Always have your goals, of course, but if you're hurt, what you're doing is not working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're hurt, or if you're just not seeing the progress that you're happy with, right? Because I know a lot of people that even if they're not hurt, they work really hard. Like they bust their ass for 8, 12, and 16 weeks for like really minuscule gains, if any. I'm just sitting here and I'm like, man, like we could help you so much.
Yep.
And that's the hard part, right? Because I think what you said is so perfect, because I think about other places in my life. And if you're really serious about something, if you want to get better at that thing, if you want to see huge gains, progress, and improvement, then get a coach, right? Like that doesn't shine poorly on you that you can't do it all yourself.
Right.
I think in anything that you're passionate about, you should have a coach, right? Like in business, have a business coach, and this, that, or the other, right? Because you're just not going to do a good job trying to manage it yourself. No one's good at that. Like you need an unbiased third party who's just going to sit here and say, here's our plan. Here's how this is going to happen. Do this. Just execute this plan, and we're going to move you from point A to point B, right? And then we're going to rinse, wash, and repeat, and we're going to be there for you every step of the way to call hot routes and make changes as those situations arise.
Right. No, and that's been the greatest thing. I mean, it's awesome to just, if I were to add another piece, cardio, like programmed cardio.
I was going to ask if that was going to be my one of my other last questions here was the cardio bit.
It's absolutely been a game changer. I mean, I did cardio like kettlebell swing cardio, or snatches, which, yeah, it's definitely cardio. But it's also lifting. It's kind of like I've got back issues and you're on a rower, like probably not the best implement to do. If your upper back's tight, like you're going to be pulling a lot of reps just on a rower. Just getting on the bike and just kind of mindless. I don't want to say mindlessly, because I stare at my heart rate the entire time. So I'm just weird like that and can do that. But I've been paying attention to HRV, and I kind of, I use the Morpheus app. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But it'll change my heart rate zones each day. So I just kind of get up to where it's conditioning, and I know it's a recovery session, so I'm not trying to push it. And then you come back and train the next day, and all of a sudden it's like, I feel good. So just doing cardio, as much as I hate to say it, like not running, you like going out for a 30, 45 minute run. If you're trying to train a lot, if you're trying to lift a lot, is not the route to go. I mean, I definitely tried that and destroyed more than just my knees and everything else. So it's, and then having somebody just say like, no, today's lifting, tomorrow's cardio, then lifting, then cardio. I mean, the 3-3 split has been, I don't know why you would do anything else if you're just an average. I mean,
it works like gangbusters.
Yeah,
man. It's so good.
If you're a 40-year-old person that just wants to feel good and be strong, I mean, it's recovery. It's not like you're not trying to do a marathon. It's straight up for recovery, so you can get back at it with lifting.
Yeah, those low, easier conditioning days, like the tempos, the cardiac output, that is one of those things. Like if I was going to pick two things where I think we make really big changes in people, I'll say three. I think big change number one we've already talked about is just the exercise selection, both in terms of like the exercise itself and the implements being used, how those exercises are being coached and cued. I think big change number two is the fact that we get people doing this, what we call low conditioning. And it makes an enormous difference. Unanimously across the board. I've never had anybody come on board, start doing the low conditioning sessions and be like, man, these aren't helping. It's like unanimously across the board, it's, oh, my resting heart rate has dropped. I'm sleeping better. I'm digesting my food better. I'm recovering better between sessions and I feel better. And then the third thing that I think we do that's very different from a lot of other people out there is we use auto-regulation very heavily, especially on that big main lift that you've seen, right? Like you always have a question mark somewhere. It's a question mark set. It's a question mark rep. It's like find a top set and back off. And so that's another place where like we're not sitting here saying, well, we're just going to hit a 5x5 today at this percentage. Like we pretty much never do that anymore. Like that main lift, we're always going to come in and put an auto-regulatory component on it in some way, right? People listen to the How to Gamify Your podcast if you want more on that. But I was going to be curious if that was another thing that you felt was helpful, was how those main lifts are programmed from that auto-regulatory standpoint. Is that different than how you've done it before? Like, do you like it? Do you not like it? Because that's one of those things where I go like, if I think about what we do that's different than other people, that's a big variable for us that I think is pretty unique.
Yeah, and that kind of came in with doing the AMRAP program, and I kind of started it in the end of 2019 into 2020. There's maybe not as much with somebody who's a little more experienced, but definitely in that beginner to intermediate range is you're leaving so much on the table, especially doing the 5x5, because I know that people get done with that 5x5 and they're like, nah, that was nothing, but that's what it called for today. And so that at least gives you an opportunity to kind of look at where you are. And if any coaches that are listening to this, and I know you have people that are, they're just banging out a set and it's like, how was that? Oh, that was super hard. And you're looking at them like, that didn't look very hard. And it's like, okay, go to 20 this time. And then they just like bang out 20 and it's like, oh yeah, that wasn't very hard. So I think especially when you start moving heavier weight and you're like, okay, this is 300. Normally I'm doing this for like 6 reps. But this is calling for an AMRAP set. Okay, so I'm just going to do as many as I can, and you hit 6, and then it's like, yeah, I still got it. 10, 12. Oh, you did 23. So that RPE of 8 just went to a 4, and it's like, so and then you have the confidence to know that you have so much more left in the tank. And you definitely try to find where that tank runs out. But that doesn't even get you into trouble. So, cause it's not like you've done like 5 sets of 25 already. So you just get that one set to kind of know where you're at. And then you can kind of just take the next week to build on that.
Yeah. I think the point about like the beginning, intermediate, advanced lifter there is important. And I'll put an asterisk on this saying that these auto-regulatory techniques that we use primarily in the big main lifts, either question marking how many sets you do, question marking how many reps you do, or doing an EDM, estimated daily max style protocol. That works really well for a long time. Most people listening to this will not get to a point where they're moving enough load where we need to reconsider that strategy, right? Because we've had people run those protocols that have 650 pushing 700 pound deadlifts. We have people run those protocols who are squatting well over 500, who bench over 3. And for me, that 300 bench, 500 squat, 600 dead is like a really good. Those are the big strength pillars our people are probably trying to cross. If you really want to squat 6 or deadlift 7 or bench 4, that's a very different. Things have to start changing to hit those numbers. But in my mind, for our athletes, I'm always thinking 300 pound bench, 500 pound squat, 600 pound deadlift. And the stuff we're talking about, we can push the gas pedal and get you to those numbers and beyond. When we start talking about more 700 pound, 600 pound, like 600 pound, 500 pound squat, 700 pound deadlift, the conversation does change there because the weight on the bar and the intensity is going to have to force different tactics and strategies. But if that's the realm that you're in, then you probably won't be working with us. We'd probably refer you to someplace else because that's not really our powerhouse anymore once you start getting into those numbers.
Well, let me ask you this on that note. So if you do have, a 700 pound squatter for a deadlift or for a, power lifter, I would argue that off season doing this stuff would be great. I was talking to a guy at the gym yesterday, and all you see is like knees that are, the widest stances possible. And they'll complain about adductor issues. And none of them are doing single leg work. It's almost like there's this, I'm a power lifter, so I've got to be in some mode of powerlifting all year long. And I just think that, if you're 30 years old, like you've got such a long time to go, that you're going to benefit greatly from changing up the exercise selection, doing a little bit of bodybuilding, learning what it means to actually use your adductor on a split squat, feeling the side ab on a split squat.
Yep.
Because it's just going to come back, and then you're going to go peak for your competition again. And your numbers, I can almost promise you that they will go up.
Yep. Yeah, I 100% agree. That's a really good question. And it's important that you go through different phases in training. I think regardless of who you are and what you're doing, that's part of the reason we have the training team set up the way we do. Because we want it to be easy for people to hit those different phases and to have different stimuli and to chase different adaptations. So we can easily move you around and give you what you need to keep bumping up these attribute bars. Because I've talked before with our athletes, what my goal is we have 6 attribute bars: strength, hypertrophy, power, endurance, movement, and then fusion, which is more metcons and medleys, essentially a blending of elements. And our goal is to be bumping out all of those attribute bars for you. If you think of yourself like a video game character, I want to keep moving out all those attribute bars. But you do that by going through phases of training where we're going to selectively prioritize certain attribute bars over others. And the issue you run into is when you really limit your exposure, which is what a powerlifter may be doing, right? And if you want to be the best powerlifter in the world, then that's definitely a necessary thing that you should do. But occasionally having a phase in training where you're going to prioritize like movement, some other things, so that you're actually feeling really good, may make a lot of sense for you, right?
Yeah.
Because I talk about, we have people in the training team that do go compete in powerlifting meets and do really well, right? Like I said, like we have people that are pushing that 700 pound deadlift threshold, that 500, 600 pound squat threshold. And it's really, really interesting to see them when we take this total package, holistic approach to training, where I'm trying to develop all these attribute bars for you. And then when we know we have a peak or a competition or a meet coming up, we kind of pull you off of this base idea. We help you specialize for this competition. And then we pull you back in, and we're back to growing all the attribute bars again. And that flow works incredibly well. You can be really good. You can be really successful. You can be an absolute savage doing that. You're not going to be the top 1% in the world as a power lifter, though, following that strategy. And that's fine, because that's not what we're trying to build. Right? I think a lot of people would be pretty jazzed with a 300 pound bench, 500 pound squat, 600 pound deadlift, or a 350 bench, 500 pound squat. Oh, now I'm just like throwing, now I got all the numbers like rolling around in my head here, right? Like a 300 pound bench, 500 pound squat, 600 pound deadlift, or a 350 to 4 bench, a 550 to 6 squat, a 650 to 7 deadlift. Like those numbers are realistic with the strategy that we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
It just kind of depends how we want to prioritize those elements. But I think that element you brought up of taking people through different phases of training with different emphasis, focusing on this very total package, holistic approach, and then peaking off of this enormous foundation that you've built for yourself. It works. It works really well.
Yeah. I got a couple of guys at the gym. One is like a 20, I may miss a 2100 or almost 2200 total. And it's like, he's a monster. And like, I would be interested. It's not like when he's competing, I'm not going to talk to him about changing anything, but it's like, try some single leg stuff just after the competition. I mean, I don't know how much farther you can get when you're at that level, but with the guys that are like 17 to 1800, and have room to grow, like definitely focus on your sport, but just focus on your health too. The longevity aspect is missing a little bit. I think it's getting better.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely getting better.
Unless you're a total masochist, then
right.
Right. Well, that's part of what we're gonna. That's part of what we really want to bring to people here at Rebel, and that's hopefully going to be happening in 2022. Is I really want to bring a new sport to the table. I want to bring a new competitive outlet for people that have these interests like we do, right? Because I can tell you from experience, leaving college, loving the weight room and training, I was never able to find my competitive outlet because CrossFit was super cool. If you have a competitive bone in your body, CrossFit's fun, right? But I didn't like all the Olympic lifting and gymnastics. It made me feel like poop. I just didn't like those movements, right? Powerlifting is so cool. You get so strong. Again, didn't really love just being a powerlifter. Didn't love just trying bodybuilding. And so there's not that competitive outlet for somebody who wants this total package approach, who wants to be strong, jacked, powerful, well-conditioned, and move well. They don't have an outlet, right? And so hopefully here in 2022, we're going to be able to actually introduce and bring something to the table that's going to give people that outlet so they can train this way and have a purpose to why they're training this way.
Yeah, it's almost because, powerlifting, you're trying to lift as much. Olympic weightlifting, you're trying to get as much over your head. So it's always like trying to just the top, but it's how can we take all these different attributes? Because I kind of look at it as like, if shit goes down, like you don't want to be the power lifter because you can't run from anybody. Same with the Olympic weightlifter, like, probably not going to be the fastest runners. CrossFit, probably going to be closer to what you would want to do, but put them in the wrong position just one time and there goes their shoulder. So it's being able to sort of morph in and out of these different attributes, which it keeps it fun too, because we're humans. We want to move in different ways and be strong in different ways.
Do you think that's a great way to wrap this up? I love that morphing concept. Being able to morph and phase change yourself as a human to have these different attributes to be well-rounded. I love that. I think that'd be a great way to wrap this.
Absolutely.
So just 2 questions here to wrap. Question number 1, if you would like to be found, where can people go to find you?
Instagram or Facebook. My name, I had to follow Kyle's inspiration with adding the underscore because there are more than one Ian Tituses in this world. So somebody got that before I did. So Ian Titus _ for Instagram, and then Facebook is Train with Titus.
Beautiful, man. I love it. And then the last question here, if somebody's listening to this, if they've been on the fence for a little while in terms of jumping in, giving the training team a go, what would be your recommendation based off your experience? It's
almost, just to keep it simple, is like just do it. Take your goal into account of what you want to do and how you feel. And I will 100% guarantee that you will not feel bad doing a program like this. It's certainly changed the way that I look at programming. It's changed, and I'm old. I mean, I know I keep kind of saying that, and 43 is not old, but but I think the majority of the people in the group are a lot younger than I am. But so it can be done. You don't want to feel like a train wreck, and you want to be strong. And if you're single, you want the girls to just watch you walk by. Or if you're married, you want your wife to slap you on the ass. So give you something to hold on to.
Oh, fantastic. Beautiful. And Ian, thank you again so much for taking the time today and having a chat with me. I really enjoyed this. Everybody else who's been listening, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you all have an absolutely beautiful week. Yeah, that's all I got for you.
Take care, guys.